we're going to go ahead and get started. People will keep coming in. I found it. I did. Thanks, Esther. Okay, so for those of you in the room, if you have questions, please turn the mic on so that people online can hear. You just have to hit it once and the red light will come on, and then you can hold it while you talk. You can just on and off, okay? So I'm Jessica Smith, for those of you that haven't met me. I am the new-ish preschool specialist. I started in February. I replaced Melissa Bowe. I've been working on this grant for 7 months, and it's been quite the adventure and continues to be. And so I just wanted to have this meeting with everyone to kind of review some practices that we can put into place to make FY19 so much smoother and end on a good note. So John McQuarrie is here with us. This is John. He's awesome. He is support from finance. He helps me with the grant, and he's here to help me answer any questions you may have. So just let me know. So just an introduction. Like I said, I came to USBE in February. I learned that there had been a lot of employee turnover, especially in the preschool department, and especially since this grant was created. I was assigned the Hqsr-E grant and learned of its very difficult requirements. I've heard from many people that this is one of the most difficult grants that they've ever worked with, and it gets to be the first one that I've ever worked with, so it's been an adventure. For FY18, we had an auditor that was working with us, Melissa Stratton, as she was doing some great work, but I think they were kind of like experimenting with the position, and just because she doesn't have the preschool knowledge, I don't think it was super beneficial. She was great and to try and help me get the reimbursements as cleaned up as they could be. But when she moved to finance to take another position, which was great, but then that left me with the reimbursements all by myself. And then we also lost Tammy Goodwater as the other preschool specialist. So for 4 or 5 months now, I've been doing 3 jobs. It's been exciting. As you're very well aware, reimbursements have been backlogged, and I've been working through them as quick as possible while doing the other 3 jobs. So I just wanted to get that out there because I know that this is so frustrating for everyone involved, and I just want you to know that I have experienced those frustrations as well, and this is what's currently sitting on my desk that I'm trying to work through. So I know that each of you, getting the documentation together, I know it's not an easy task, but just keep in mind that I'm seeing like 13 of them, and these requirements will help me process the reimbursements faster and quicker and get you your money quicker. And I've been spending like hours on each one, and it will just be so helpful if we can put these fairly simple things into place. Okay, and as I was saying, as I got this grant, I was really frustrated, and I think it was a month or 2 in, I created this lovely thing to put on my desk because I just needed to have a little bit of joy, and I gave John one. I can send you one as well, so just know that I know. I get it, and if I hope today as I talk to you and I talked about these things that I don't come off frustrated. I know it's not your fault. I know you guys have not received the guidance that you needed in the first place. But I also had those frustrations, so if that just comes out, I apologize, but we're just going to move forward as a team and get through this. So just some information. So Hqsr-E legislation will sunset in June 2019, and I have a happy goodbye face about that because I am not sad that this grant is going away. It needs to be rewritten and repaired, most definitely. So it's in the process of being written right now, new legislation. Most likely it can look very different from what it currently looks like. It might be on a smaller scale. We're still unsure on what that will be based on the current evaluations. Regardless, if it is similar to Hqsr-E, the actual processes of the grant functioning will be a lot smoother as far as running it. So that's in the future. So like I said, so ease of implementation is a top priority. It's likely to be very different, and we're going to try to avoid TANF funds so that you can expand to all kids, which is what's really needed in the state of Utah. And then I forgot I was going to give this caveat. So most of you know that I've planned a state workshop tomorrow and the next day, and so I did this last night, and so if there's typos or things like that, I apologize. Just trying my very best to get all that I needed done. Okay, another fun thing that got thrown into the mix is that they decided to switch programs from UCA to Utah Grants. It just has been the perfect storm for me. So that is up, and they've begun to add some programs in. They haven't added Hqsr-E yet, but we're working on it. Award letters have been my first priority, so if you have not received like the email from me saying that we've finalized your budget and I sent you the finalized budget, then you really need to, for FY19, then I really need you to work on that with me, because as soon as I get everybody finished and ready, then I can submit those to John and we can start getting those award letters. You can start spending money without the award letter, but I would not recommend doing that until we've had that finalized email conversation of this is your budget for FY19, this is what is going to be implemented into Utah Grants as soon as it's up, just so that we don't get in trouble of spending TANF funds that you shouldn't be spending.
So I think that's fine, as long as the period that you're spending the money for falls within July 1st through June 30th of this year. It needs to be within that period or it will not be eligible for reimbursement.
So everything... Yeah. So yeah, no,
as long as it falls within the period and you don't overspend, like she said, that is good advice to finalize the budget first to make sure that the funds are there, but you're not likely to blow through your entire budget within the first.
No. And with like in Shelley, for example, like we've been in a lot of conversations, so I'm sure what you've spent, we've talked about, and you know that it's probably going to be okay. Just like keep the communication coming so that we don't get to the end of the year and you've spent money and I go, you shouldn't have done that. And that's not justified with TANF funds. After we get the award letters, then I'm going to really work on getting those FY18 reimbursements put into the system. You will get paid. I can't tell you when it will be right now. We're working on that. But again, that's my first priority. Jamie Robinson, who you might meet, she might come in depending on how the other meeting ends. She is our new Tammy. And oh my goodness, I love her already. She started this week. She's amazing. After the workshop is done, we're going to hit it hard on these reimbursements now that I have some extra hands. And so expect this to start moving a lot quicker because there's more of us now and we can handle that. So that'll be great. Okay, so for enrollment documentation, this is, like you know, required for us to process reimbursement. So this year, we're going to require that you send us September and October. I'm going to send you an Excel sheet, like for the template, so you know what you're required to send me. Keep the months separate. Don't combine them. So I need like a roster for September of all your students and a roster for October of all your students, and I will do the averaging of the two. I've sent this example before, but I'll send it again. Make sure that the TANF students are clearly identified in the enrollment documentation. And then if you can do a count with your Excel document of having the total enrollment total at the bottom along with the TANF enrollment. I would prefer that you use the Excel template that I am sending. If for whatever reason you have an internal report that is really like not transferring to Excel well, like I don't want you to enter 1,000 kids by hand into Excel. That's ridiculous. So if you're running into like some kind of problem like that, you can't just like copy and paste into Excel, let me know. And if it contains like the details of the ID number, the last name, first name, day of birth, and like what school they're attending, if that internal report has that information and you've calculated the TANF and total enrollment, we can probably use that internal report. But like I said, it'll be easier if everybody just uses the same Excel sheet. So if you can use the Excel sheet, please do. If not, let me know and we can talk about it. So we're going to take the September and October numbers and use that for those numbers for all of your reimbursements for FY19. So as you continue to enroll, keep that in mind. I would probably encourage you to slow down on the TANF after October, which is kind of sad. But if you keep going and you get a bunch of kids and you feel within like the next couple months after that, it's open for discussion. So let me know and we can talk about that. The majority of you won't have a big increase after September and October. Plus, we don't want to be paying for just a couple months or like keeping that in mind. We're paying for the full year of these kids. So just let me know if you feel that like that's for your program really unfair, or if you have a whole bunch more kids that you need funding for, because the purpose of the grant is to fund the students. But we just felt that it would be easier to get that firm number and just work with it rather than trying to, and then we can adjust the budgets in the beginning to avoid problems later on. So just let me know. I would like this enrollment documentation due to me on November 9th. But it needs to come to Kristen. So I should change that. Due to Kristen. November. Don't send it to my email. Please don't do that. It makes me sick every time I open an email and there's all these children's data, and I'm like, now that's out in the world for any criminal to take and use, you know. So we want to protect these little kiddos. We don't want them to get to, you know, adulthood and realize that their social security number was taken a long time ago or something. Anyway, so just make sure that gets sent to Kristen. This is Jamie, everyone. She's awesome. She's our new preschool specialist through 2nd grade. I was just telling them how wonderful you are, so I'm glad to have you. She's awesome. Okay, so we're going to go through some organization things. So we're going to go for quarterly reimbursements at a minimum. If you can send them monthly, that would be awesome. The smaller they are, the quicker it is to reimburse them. If you can't do monthly, that's totally okay. Let's just try to do them quarterly. General ledger. So on the next slide, I have a ledger. A lot of you are familiar with it because Melissa was using it and implementing and entering your reimbursements into that. So I'm going to ask that you guys do that for those reimbursements. We're going to add some category pages for when you scan in documents. So like I've created them and I'll put them in a PDF and send to you. So like in the PDFs you send me of all your documentation, there'll be this. And then after that will be the salary documentation. And then there will be the person, you know, that makes sense. So that when I print it out, I'm very clear on what documentation is going in which area. I'm not having to sift through and organize it. Document page numbers. I'll discuss these a little bit more in a second. Section of the page with letters. Documentation should answer who was paid, what was purchased, and when was it purchased in FY19. Again, those dates are July 1st, 2018 to June 30th, 2019. If it's outside of those dates, I cannot reimburse it. Okay? And then I just always want you to keep in mind, how do all of those purchases benefit TANF students? They have to benefit TANF students. So if you're, that has a typo in it, but regardless, you know what I'm trying to say. I don't necessarily need that on the documentation. Like if it's snack, I'm a preschool teacher. I understand that snack benefits them. I understand that like classroom materials do. But if there's something that's not blatantly obvious of how it benefits those TANF students, please document of why that was needed for your program. Okay, so this is the general ledger. A lot of you are familiar with it. I'll send it out to you. So it has the categories, so salaries, benefits, purchased tech services all down the side. Then there's a total of how much is on that invoice or receipt. And there's a document number. That's going to help me out a lot and help us out a lot. So if there is something that I need to ask with you and clarify with you, we can both look at the ledger, both look at the numbers that you gave me and really quickly identify it. Documentation description, so you can put there like if it's a receipt, if it's an invoice, if it's an email confirmation. Description or notes, so you know if something's not clear on like how that benefited your TANF kids, then you can put that there of we needed this because of this type of thing. And then this last two columns you're very familiar with, I'm sure, are the specialist comments and questions. So if I have questions regarding your reimbursement, I'll put it there and flag it red, and then you can respond over here, or we can just have a phone call. This is just my way to make sure that I adjust every item. So just a reminder, do not charge for IGP student expenses to the grant. Those are supposed to be separate portion of the grant. If your scholarship for IGP students is not high enough to compensate for that, then we need to adjust your scholarship cost per child. And we can do that with DWS. They're separate funds. They're not supposed to be split. So, yeah. Use the mic, sorry, so they can hear you. We just turn it on.
So if the kids are in the same classrooms, how do you separate those expenses?
So, yeah, and we'll get to that in just a second. I don't know what page it's on. We'll just jump here real fast. So the way that I calculate the TANF expenses can be one of two ways. So we can do what would be the classroom equivalent, which is also on this document, the expansion sheets examples. So I understand that the students are not in all in the same classroom, but that's one way for us to calculate the TANF equivalent. So like if we were to go through 5 classes and say, okay, your TANF enrollment represents 5% of this classroom, 10% of this classroom, 2% of this classroom, eventually we would come to the same percentage of like that equals a full classroom. So I usually divide your TANF number by 30 because you have 15 kids in your morning class and 15 kids in your afternoon class. You can usually fit more than that, but 15 is pretty average. And that'll equal the approximate FTE. So that's how we fund that. So for example, there was a program this last year and they had the majority of their programs were being paid by the grant, but they had 13 IGP students. So that equivalates to almost a session. And so those scholarships should be high enough to pay for those teachers like half of their salary, half of their benefits. That should be coming from the IGB funds. This has not been clear in the past, and I understand that. But they are different. And so if that's the case in your program and you feel like that's not high enough to cover whatever your IGP students equivalent to, then we need to work on that. And I can help with DWS to adjust your IGP cost per student.
So this is complete opposite of what I was told by, I think it might have been you and Natalie Grange for financial
When was that?
reporting. It was back in like June or July.
I wasn't here then.
We didn't charge our IGP kids to the TANF program.
You didn't?
No.
Okay.
But then we were told we should because when we're reporting on our AFR, we're reporting the TANF
Okay,
grant.
so I remember this was over the phone call, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so for FY18, yes, because that's what we're doing, and we're because that wasn't made clear in the past. So you've already spent the funds. You need the funds. You're not going to get them through the scholarship because that's not what your contract was. So for you guys, for that specific situation, that's what she recommended. But moving forward for everybody, you should have that cost per child be high enough. And if your situation gets a little sticky again, we can talk to Natalie about it. But for most programs, it should be completely separate.
So where do we put those funds then as far as the financial part? So when we're getting funds from DWS, where are we putting that revenue? Because we can't put it in 7350, which is the TANF, is what you're saying. So last year when we did it, we charged those expenses to preschool. So do we put that money back into preschool? Or
John, do you know the answer to this? I know we talked on the phone with Natalie and for their specific case, but
I'd have to check with Natalie. I want to make sure.
because as of this year, we've started charging those expenses in TANF for the TANF kids and the IGP kids. Because that's what we were told last year, but that was the big thing is if I receive that money from DWS into TANF, then on our program report, we're showing more money. We're showing a carryover, basically. So she said, you need to charge the expenses to TANF for both TANF and IGP, and then subtract out the amount that you receive from DWS so you don't get, so you're not double dipping, basically.
yeah. So depending, a lot of this, for the majority of you, this hasn't been a problem. We've only done the equivalent of what your TANF equivalents and your BAs have figured that out. For these guys, it was a little sticky, and so we'll talk to Natalie again and clear up how to handle that for FY19. But if any of you have questions about that, we can call and figure out particular for your program, but the majority of you, we've just been working it out. So just let me know on that if you need any assistance.
Yeah, so what does everyone else do?
I don't know if we have a lot of BAs in the room that handle it. Go ahead.
So you're talking about how do we track the funds between the IGP and the high quality?
Yeah, where do you put the revenue from?
There's a separate program that the revenue gets recorded to for the IGP versus the TANF. So all of our stuff gets tracked in its own program for IGP, and all expenses are associated in that one program. So they're separate on our books, at least.
So there's a separate program with the state?
Yeah, the state has a program, 5676 is their IGP program.
Okay.
That I think would come through on the allotment memo, should show on the allotment memo when those funds are paid out to you on a reimbursement. And then whatever your internal code or whatever, however you're set up internally to do that. But the state recognizes those as separate program numbers. So that's how we track those. And when the revenues come into us on the allotment, we receipt those to the different program.
So you get your revenue for IGP off the allotment memo?
I'd have to double check.
Because ours just comes as a check from the DWS.
Either way, if it comes as a check or either way, it should designate on the, like on your award letter, when you get your award letters, it designates your program and your revenue function, right? And then as those monies come in, as they're identified by our crew as IGP, then we would just code it to that program.
Okay.
Is how we handle it.
And so do you split your expenses then?
Yeah.
You
Yep.
just,
So we'd have to split the expenses to wash them.
The source of funds, I don't even know if this thing works, okay. So you've got TANF as your source of funds, but they're going for two separate programs, and that's the basis of programmatic accounting, is that you split those out and that you account for them separately. Even though it's coming from TANF, you still have to say, this is how much I'm spending for IGP, and this is how much I'm spending for high quality.
Yeah, well, that's good to know, because when we called the state, they didn't know that there was a program for IGP. Is that just recent?
I don't know. It's on their current chart of accounts that's on their website.
Okay.
I want to say it was in the 18 chart of accounts as well, as a new program number. I think it was added back in 2018 too.
Okay, so you just do your IGP to the 5676 and then the TANF to the 7350?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Because all that accounting stuff, that's why John's here. Because I'm like, I don't know. I was a preschool teacher 7 months ago, so that's it's just like, wait, what? Okay. So like I said, I talked about the category pages. You can create ones of your own if you want, but I will provide you with a PDF. It's just so handy to like go through and be like, okay, now I'm looking at salary documentation. Now I'm looking at receipts or travel documentation. So just if you can do that when you scan them, that'd be awesome. Document page numbers, just put them up in that top right corner. This is just a very simple example, but let's say you're charging salaries for Rebecca, John, and Alex. If on the ledger, if you'll just put like 1A, 1B, 1C, so I know where those numbers are. I have spent a lot of time trying to add up numbers and find numbers. Sometimes like the grant will be accidentally charged an amount, and then they'll go to reduce it, but it's reduced in separate, not in the same total, but there's 3 amounts and they all equal that total. So I just sit there and try to add them up. And there's just one of me. So if you guys can do the majority of that, and so it's just very, very clean, and I know where those numbers are that you're charging for and where that documentation is, that would be awesome.
I have a question, Jessica.
It's on.
Okay, so that stack of paper that's on your desk that you have to go through, we send in our Encore reports of all the salaries and everything. You want every single one of those pages with a number on the top of them?
No, so you can staple it, and well, you can't send it like that way. So, but if like there's like a June report, let's say, I would just put a number on the top of the June report, and then like when I get to July, I'll know that, and there'll be a 2 on that one, let's say, then I'll realize that that's the 2. So you can just kind of leave a note on that, but you don't need to mark every internal report. Is that clear? Kind of clear as mud? No? No, it's not clear. Okay, so like if it's receipts, and there's like 1 receipt per page, then I would number those, because that's easy. If you have like a June report or whatever from Encore or whatever your internal documentation is, I'm okay if you just write like the page number on top, and maybe you even put a note of like, this is 12 pages and then I can just clear to like where the break off is of the next report. Maybe you put a post-it on and say this is the new report or something like that, just kind of notes. I can figure out the majority of it, like with the receipts and stuff. If you just send me like an email saying, we have encore reports, make sure you separate those by months, like that's sufficient. Just give me a heads up so I'm not, the internal reports aren't the biggest problem. The problem is the receipts and trying to sift through like all of the different documentation and trying to find those numbers. Mm-hmm.
Our system doesn't allow us to break down that detail by month. So when I've submitted mine, I've had to give you, the page may have some from a previous period.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's fine. Okay. So if you're doing it, if we've already reimbursed for those months, then just cross those out for me.
We usually draw a line.
Yeah,
and
just anything clipped. See, and and I just love that you say that because this is the problem, is that all of you have different systems and run different ways. And for me, that's like a different language. So I spend hours on Davis's and then I switch to Weber's or switch to Irons and I'm like, hold on, like I have to try and figure it out. So just keep in mind, Jessica was a preschool teacher 7 months ago and doesn't know a lot of accounting. Like any help and guidance you can offer me, like it might seem like you're writing so many little notes and you're like, she should be able to get this. Just help me out, please. Like I would love to get it processed faster. So just whatever clarifications you add, it'll look different for all of you. Just maybe pass it to someone else, take it home to your husband and be like, does this make sense? And he's like, no, then fix it. Okay, so for salaries and benefits, I really do need a job description of everyone that's being paid. If you're charging their salaries to the grant, I need to know why. Are they a program director? Are they the teacher? Are they a TA? What classroom are they in? Just make it really, really clear. I need to know the subs names and who subbed that month. So if you have a ledger and you're just sending us, if it's by month, then you're print off the names of everybody. If the majority of those people are on the job description list, then I just need you to make a note of maybe just write it on that ledger of like Sally subbed this month or whatever. Just write sub next to their name, just so I have some documentation of who this person is, and it's clear that you reviewed it and made sure that it wasn't someone like accidentally getting on. Because you have other preschool teachers that aren't being charged to the grant, and it happens a lot that these salaries get bumped on. So just review those names on those documentation and make sure that everyone that is getting paid from the grant should be, and if people are not supposed to be, that those get corrected. If you have errors on there, make sure that it's clearly crossed out and you offer an explanation of how you repaired it. So if the grant was charged a certain amount of money and that was incorrect, make sure that you just clearly explain how you resolved that. A big part of the confusion has happened with journal entries. I will get a ledger and it just says journal entry, journal entry, journal entry, journal entry, and it's just listing all these amounts that are charged to the grant with no knowledge of who it is. And I get journal entry documentation, but then again, I'm spending hours trying to go, where did this number come from? And maybe it's split at different times. So if you guys can just, if there's journal entries, write, the documentation for this is on page whatever, line F, just make sure that journal entries are very clearly explained where they're coming from. And I need to be able to tie that money to a staff member or to whatever to say this is how it directly benefited TANF students for every dollar spent. A lot of you guys have program directors that are only being paid a portion of their salary from the grant. I need clear documentation of that and how much they are being paid from the grant. So if they're being paid 25%, whether that's a time card that shows that they've split their funds and that they're only being paid a portion, or an internal documentation. And did you want us to do that every time or just a couple?
I don't know. I haven't seen all of your documentation, but I would say that unless there's a change, once would be sufficient.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind. So on a lot of when you place salaries and things like that, make sure that you identify full salaries and sub-salaries. We've kind of discussed that. There's the change in the PD that we're enforcing better. It's been written down, but it hasn't been enforced like it should have been, is that if we're paying all of your staff, not just your expansion staff, but all of your staff for professional development, that professional development needs to be tied to TANF needs and address those needs. So if you have a month where you run a PD like that and we're paying a lot of salaries, then I need you to document real quick, like, okay, these guys were all PD. You can just do a bracket and a big PD next to it, you know, like you don't need to write PD next to everybody's name if you can just make it clear in some way. And then I would appreciate if you could just provide an agenda for that PD that proves that, yes, it was TANF focused. Mm-hmm.
Will you go over again what you consider to be TANF needs?
So the big things are like social, emotional, or behavior. But I'm going to be honest, I'm also learning what, because Jennifer is the one that was there when the bill was created and knows the intention of the grant. So a lot of these things I go back to her and ask if they can be clarified. So if you have something that you would like to be charged to the grant and you're just not sure, just ask me. Just send me a quick email of what you're going to do before you spend those funds, what that PD is going to cover, and I can talk with Jennifer and let you know if we can fund that with the grant. And I'm sure as time goes on and I hear more and more of the PD you're offering, I can become more familiar with all those topics. I'll try and see if I can get a list from her. I think I've mentioned that once. I don't know if we got that, so I'll see if I can get a better list and send that out with my email with you. A big thing that I've seen too is on the for the job descriptions for some salaries and benefits, if like someone gets married or has a nickname, so a lot of times like on the job description list you give me like the name that they go by in your class, like in your relationships, but their legal name on your document is different. I need to know that. It gets really tricky trying to go, well, who's this person and why, you know? So just make sure that whatever the job description list that you give me matches the jobs, the names on the report. Okay, so for these categories, it's fairly simple. So purchase professional and technical services, other purchase service and travel. Document who these services benefit. So is it the classroom equivalent, what schools and what staff are being paid, or if it's the whole program. So this is kind of tricky to explain. So like, for Logan, for example, they have a cleaning service that comes and cleans their building because the district won't do it. So that would be considered like the classroom equivalent. They qualify for how many classrooms, and those are the classrooms that we're paying for to get cleaned. Whereas if you have like someone come in to provide PD, that's benefiting the whole program. And let's say that it's not PD that's TANF focused, so it's something that we're only supposed to be a TANF portion of that PD, then you would probably do the percentage. So the big thing is I need you guys to show your work. If there's a number, if you're not charging the full number on the receipt and you have figured out how much you're charging to the grant, I need to know how that number came to be. Because that's the hardest part, because I'm like, did they do a percentage? Did they do it based on FTE? Did they just do less than the percentage? Because that's how they split it between the funds. Also, if you have like you all have program codes for the grant, and so if that's how you're deciphering for you guys, like that's the amount that was paid to the grant, I don't know those program codes, so you need to make that very clear of this is the TANF number, look for this. Please don't let me guess how you came to a number. That's been the really hard part and what has been really time consuming.
So do we have to send that every time we do a reimbursement? Like if we send the breakdown at the first?
Yeah, if it's consistent, if you're finding the numbers and the percentages the same time every way, I would just like write a little reminder of that, of we remember this is how the percentage that we charge to TANF, and I can just check a couple of them, and if the percentages match, then we're good to go. But if for whatever reason you've changed that on something or found the amount you're charging the grant in a different way, then I just need to know that. A huge thing too that I found is before you send the reimbursements, review your supplies and make sure nothing in that supply area should be in one of these categories. Another program had someone that professional development had come and from out of state, they traveled, and all of that was in supplies. Supplies and materials are things that you can tangibly hold. You can't, I guess you can give her a hug, but that's not what I mean. You know what I mean? So just make sure just that those things don't have to be your categories. Because what happens is if it comes to me and I see that it's in the wrong place, then we have to backtrack it through the system, make that thing, adjust the numbers. It just is a huge hassle for both of us. So if we can get it right the first time, that would be great. And I'm not sure, maybe you know this, but Melissa in the end was figuring out that it was best for you guys to keep things in UCA in a draft format while we worked through things so that we didn't have to do the back out process. Does Utah Grants have a draft way as well or no?
For reimbursement?
Yeah.
For a reimbursement request? No, there'd be really no way we would see it until it's actually submitted.
Okay.
So if that's the case, we'll play it by ear the first couple times. And it might be best that you just send me a document of like, these are the amounts we're charging for each category before you enter them in.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend is if you're not sure, or if you want to avoid the hassle of having to go through the system multiple times to fix errors, send her the stuff, get her sign off, then just run it through the system and it'll be a quick.
Yeah.
That won't be.
Yeah, so if you just want to send me like
difficult.
an Excel sheet with the totals of each area, and then when I check your documentation, if all that adds up, then we're good to go. Then we can enter it in the system and be really fast. Okay, so again, the supplies and materials. These got separated, I'm sorry, again, last night. Back. Just be clear on if you're doing the TANF percentage or the total enrollment or class enrollment. So some will do whatever their total enrollment percentage of TANF is, or they'll just do the classroom, so I didn't know what that percentage is, or the classroom equivalent if we're going by the FTE calculations. Show your work, and make sure that you're scanning the entire receipt. The receipt needs to show the date, the amount, and that there was no sales tax paid. A lot of the receipts I've got have been cut off. The date has been cut off. I think it's Dollar Tree, that the receipt's at the very end. So just make sure that if you have to fold it a little bit with the stuff that I don't need to see just to get that date on there, that would be great. Avoid handwritten dates if they've been cut off. I really would like to see the actual dates from wherever you're purchasing your services and items. So outside documentation is needed. I know this grant is burdensome. I know 100% is just redonkulous. I hate it too, but it's required, and so we have to work through it. One more year, guys, and then I was joking yesterday that whenever we're done holding on to these documents, I might come back, even if I'm not working here, just to burn them. So it's a struggle for all of us. So just please make sure that you're doing that. The majority of internal documentation is insufficient. If you don't have any other documentation than internal documentation, then that's okay. But if there's any outside thing, make sure that you send that out. Itemized receipts showing what was purchased. I don't want just like the credit card receipt that just shows that a transaction took place. We had one of those for Barnes & Noble for $300, and I promise that, like, I'm sure that they bought books, but they could have bought Nooks, and I can't prove that. So I need to be able to back that up. So please make sure that you're showing itemized receipts that show what item was purchased. A lot of times too, you guys are splitting, like I said, between programs. So if there's a receipt and we're only paying for a couple items on that receipt, make sure that's very clear. And then how you came to the total that you're charging for the grant. And then a lot of times you guys will highlight those, which is fantastic, unless you scan it and then it doesn't show up. So if you can use a color scanner or just use a pen or something that you know will show up when it's copied, that's clear, because you can leave me lots of notes and highlighter and then I don't get them and we're stuck, okay? So we've kind of gone over this already. I have the example of the classroom equivalent and how I find that. I've reviewed that before. So I just take whatever your baseline is. I keep your baseline enrollment in mind. I subtract that from your current total enrollment to find how much growth you've had. But then I find out how many expansion seats or TANF number you've had, which is 44. Because 78 is bigger than 44, I can justify that, yes, you didn't expand those 44 seats. And then we divide that by, in this example, I did 36. I've gone more to the 30. That's not a guaranteed thing. I mean, I'll stretch as much as I can, but 30 I feel like is pretty accurate, and then we'll equal the FTE, and then I can round up from there, okay? So if you have questions of that, like let me know and I can help you work through this with your numbers. Or if you're, oh my goodness, or if you're just working on your, doing the, I think, who did I do? It was Iron. I was working with you guys. You guys did really great job of like, they did just, I think, the TANF enrollment for the majority of them and just wrote the percentage on the bottom. So if that's the easiest way for you guys to do it, Severe's done it that way too. Of just, send me every receipt that you spend for your preschool program and charge me 31% of it. I'll do it, type of thing. 31% if that's equal to your TANF enrollment. Don't take that as 31% of everyone, whatever your TANF percentage is. Okay, so receipts, invoices, or receipts. Do not send me cart screenshots. That is not sufficient documentation. I need to see an actual receipt and that the funds were actually spent. A screenshot doesn't show me that of a cart, shopping cart online. Email confirmations, which are pretty much receipts, when you get those are okay. Again, no handwritten dates. And so the thing that I'm going to ask you guys to do as you go through your receipts, and you can ask whoever is spending these funds to do this, it doesn't have to be just you. I would recommend that you do it as you're gathering them, not just in one setting, is go through and check the date, check that there was no sales tax, and circle the amount that we're paying on the grant on every receipt. Okay, so there's a cart screenshot. Again, that's before checking out, that's insufficient. That's not accurate. Okay, so here, this one was on one page, which is why it's document numbered, but we've checked the date was in the time, we've checked that no sales tax was paid, and we circled the amount. On this receipt, sales tax was paid, so we just crossed out the sales tax there, circled the amount being paid, and checked the date. So again, it's not a huge deal, but if I have to go, I cannot pay sales tax. As you know, on the, I think it's the pink form for you guys, no sales tax is on there. So I have to go through and check those sales tax, and if you've missed some sales tax, then that changes all the numbers that are in Utah grants, and it's a huge mess. So if you guys are going through and checking for sales tax, then you'll find your own errors, and just circle the subtotal before. So again, don't cut off anything when scanning, and make sure they all have this documentation. If you guys can use this same coding would be great. The checks for the date and the sales tax, the amount being charged circled, and cross out the tax. Again, the more uniform all of the reimbursements are, the faster I will be. If we can just all speak the same language, it would be lovely. Okay, another example. So just circled, we crossed out the tax because they accidentally had tax on this one, so they're charging $298. This other one, we've marked that it was paid within the window. Again, tax was accidentally paid, so we've crossed it out and circled the amount being paid. Okay. So the documents you have, I gave you the calculating the TANF expansion seats that you can do on your own if you're going to do it by FTE. Again, I can work with you on that. I've given you the information and reimbursement guidelines here that you've had before. We just changed that it's Utah grants now, and reminded that the IGP and Hqsr-E need to be, TANF and IGP need to be billed separately. And then this one, I just would like you guys to hang on. It's, I went through the PowerPoint and just wrote down, summarized it for the most part. So if this is kind of your go-to, if you are sitting down processing it and you need help, this is your gold one. Again, please feel free to call me and ask me any questions. And hopefully as we get this going, it'll be a lot smoother and we can process them quicker. Like I said, now that Jamie's on board and the workshop is done, we will start blowing through these as fast as we can. And I just ask, I know it's so frustrating, and I know it's frustrating for everyone involved, but as I email you or call you and ask for more information, please just work with me. I'm just getting the documentation that's required by the legislation, and it's not fun for me either. And so let's just work through it as best we can. You guys have any additional questions?
I'm just curious. Excuse me. I'm just curious. Do you know? Unfortunately, it sounds like this is going to continue on. I'm an accountant. I hate this grant. It's one of the worst grants we own as a district.
I've heard this so many times.
Causes us nightmares.
Yes. So
And it's for very little money for us in the grand scheme of things.
I know,
but-
it doesn't. So if it continues, it will not look like this. Like,
So I'm just curious, do you kind of know what they're thinking right now as to how it's going to look and how it might work?
are you
I know
familiar
it'll
with the
change
KSEP grant at all?
the what?
The KSEP grant for kindergarten? I don't know if Jordan is participating in that.
No.
So KSEP is a grant that Jennifer helped organize after this one. She learned from this grant and created KSEP. And KSEP runs a lot more smoothly. What are the things that can be charged on it? Supplies?
Yeah, but it's mainly just salaries and wages, and that's pretty much it. So the more that we narrow that down, it just simplifies everything.
Yeah, so if the grant continues, like the reimbursement process will be so much smoother, and like that's the top priority. So, but also like the legislation, as far as like what the classroom will look like and how it will actually be running in the classroom, that's completely up in the air. It might go to a smaller level to really hone in on like what high quality preschool is. It might be like working with Upstart in the classroom. We'll have to see, like all of that is still up in the air, and what they would like to propose to the legislators and what will pass. But if it continues, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. It's not nice. And I just love, because like I continue to hear this, like it's the worst grant I've ever worked with. And like, I'm so lucky that it's the only, like, welcome to grants. Like, here's this one. So I know, right? It's only up. That's what I keep telling myself.
You'll know in January what it will look like,
When legislation passes, yeah.
and then we'll know what our expectations are if we want to
Mhm.
very quickly.
Mhm. Yeah. So
Session usually gets finalized around March.
Yeah.
March, so.
yeah. So as soon as I know more, and as the what are they calling it? The board, or the committee? I can't remember. There's a different word. Cabinet. That's the word. There's a cabinet that they have created for it's something like the empowerment of children, families with young children, and they're the ones that are kind of working on this new legislation. So as they continue to work closer to like what they're actually presenting, and if I'm okay to present that to you guys, I will. I'll update you as soon as possible. But yes, it's gonna go away. Farewell, Hqsr-E. And I'm gonna fight for like no name even similar. Like we're done. It's a swear word around here. So thank you guys so much for all you do and for sticking through this very annoying grant. We are benefiting the lives of preschoolers, even though it's extremely burdensome. And so hopefully we can find a way to do that that's more enjoyable in the future and less burdensome, because I would like to get back to helping you guys in the classroom and stop working on finances and paper, because that's not what I went to school for. So please, 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 I've said it a million times, but just call me if you have questions. We're happy to work with you. Each of you have different programs and different needs, and so a lot of times it's just a matter of communicating those needs and working through it as a group. And most times I'll need to ask for support from my team over here, because again, I'm not a finance girl working on it. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for coming, and thanks for your willingness to do this with me and for me. It will help things move along a lot faster. So thanks. You guys are good to go.